without further ado, if you gentlemen would like to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your SCA history, and then we'll get into some questions. How about that? Oh, and now I've got a frozen Havek. Duke Mark, can you still hear me? And now I've got a frozen everybody. Awesome. All my stuff. Do I still have you guys?
Yep.
Okay. Hopefully we're still streaming. So I asked you to introduce yourselves, and then everything froze. So let's start over. Duke Quebec, would you like to start?
Sure.
Introduce yourself and give us a little of your SCA history.
Yeah, so my name is Havek. I won my first tournament in 92. I was knighted in 93. I sat the throne 8 times, 2 as principality, and 6 kingdom. So I've done a lot of things, been around for a while.
My name is Mark. I found the SCA in the early 2000s. I've reigned in Sinagua in the Mists, and then I've had 3 kingdom reigns. I had done a lot of other martial arts and other sword arts before I found the SCA, but the SCA was the best, so I stuck around, and I'm still trying to learn.
Excellent. Well, thank you, gentlemen, once again for coming back to do this episode again. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties, but I think we got them all ironed out now. So without further ado, how about we get into some questions, right? So this first question, we've discussed a little bit before because, well, let's not beat around the bush. I am a shorty. I am the super short fighter guy that runs around and tries not to get killed by all the tall to regular sized people. I'm only 5'4". And then on the then we have Duke Mark, who's pretty much right there in the middle, average to a little bit above average size. And then we have Duke Quebec, who is, well, he's tall. There's no other way to say it. He's very tall. So my question to you guys is, how do you train people who don't have maybe the same body type as you? Not just size, but or not just height, but size, or their bodies are just different than you.
Want to start, Mark?
Sure. So everybody has to be treated like an individual. So when you start working with somebody, you look at how does their body move? Do they have any injuries? Kind of their natural tendencies. And then there are certain concepts that are pretty universal, and then how that person applies them might be a little differently. So having your hips under your shoulders so that you stay balanced, driving blow mechanics with your body and not your arm, using your skeleton to support things and not your tendons so that you avoid injury. Those are all pretty universal concepts. And so when I start teaching them footwork and body mechanics, we start with kind of those broad concepts, like these are the things that should happen, and then we figure out how that person applies them. So the way I throw a flat snap might be a little different than the way His Grace throws a flat snap or a flip shot. But if you look at the concepts, the kind of mechanical must-haves in those shots, we use those, because if you don't, you end up throwing bad shots, you're getting injured. So you look at kind of those broad concepts, then you apply them to that individual body and temperament.
So the way I describe it is, I cannot teach you tall. So why do I try and teach you to fight like I fight? I cannot teach you strong, and I cannot teach you fast. What I try and teach is timing, control. And those are things that can make a great fighter even better. You don't have to be strong to have good timing. You don't have to be tall to have good control of your opponent. You must know what your body's capable of and what the risks are when you move. right? Anybody can learn that. You don't have to be strong or fast to have good timing. If you have good timing, you can make good distances in your fighting.
Excellent. Yeah, there's so many people who, I've heard them say, "Oh, I'd love to fight, but I'm just not strong enough," or maybe when I get in better shape or something like that. What would you say to a fighter who, or someone who wants to fight, who puts those types of conditions on them? Do you think they should try it, or do you think they should give it some time?
I think it is really tough. If it's not your passion, it's a difficult road. And a lot of those guys that don't have the passion don't last very long. I don't want to push somebody to the fight doesn't want to, but do what you enjoy. If you enjoy doing it, it doesn't matter what you're doing, do that. If you don't like fighting sword and shield, you want to fight with something else, do what you enjoy. Even if you're going to get beat for a long time, doesn't matter. Because if you're not doing what you enjoy, you won't fight anyway. There's always a reason not to fight. Every day I can come up with a reason not to fight, or you can just fight. If you want to do it, you're going to put your stuff on. If you're new and you're like, well, I don't have any gear. Well, when I was new, I made my gear. If you're passionate, you'll find a way to get out there. You'll borrow, you'll make, you'll sell your car, whatever you got to do. If you're passionate about it, you'll do it. If you like what you're doing, you'll fight. If you're not doing it out of love, you're not going to fight long anyway. Find your passion.
So what I would say, if you want to go to the gym and work out and get in shape, that's awesome. But you don't need to do that to fight and to fight well. Technique trumps strength. Timing trumps speed. And so if you feel like you're very out of shape, just going to fighter practice will get you in better shape if your baseline is low. And you can look at a lot of 50, 60-year-old Dukes, guys who are maybe a little heavy, and they will run a 20-year-old athlete into the ground because they're more relaxed when they're fighting. Their technique is better, and so they're exerting a lot less effort. So technique and skill is more important than kind of physical attributes. So I like to do resistance training and running and things. I like those things. They're not going to harm your fighting, and they might help, but you don't need to do those things to fight and to fight well. And if I had to prioritize one or the other, I would prioritize fighter practice. Skill training should always, I think, come before conditioning and things. So if somebody wants to fight and they feel like they wouldn't be successful without getting in shape first, I would say that that's not something they have to worry about. Fighting will get them in shape for fighting.
Excellent. Cool. I know that a lot of people, they worry about that. They really do want to fight. They want to get into armor. They want to try it out, but they're concerned about one thing or another. So that's some really good answers and some great encouragement. So the last time we got together, we talked about the differences between, or actually like basically how you guys approach fighting at tournaments. Which was really, really interesting. But if you wanted to know that about these guys, well, you should have watched the last one. Because today I want to get into some different stuff. We've had some conversations offline about the difference between practice, pickup fighting, and then like tournament fighting. And I'd like for you to share your views on how you approach those things differently, or if you do approach them differently.
Well,
For myself, you want me to start, Mark, on this one?
sure.
For myself, practice. Go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say practice and tournament are definitely different. When I go to practice, I'm looking to build my skills and help the people around me. So I'm much more likely to go in and say, well, I'm only working on this motion or this shot, or I'm only going to do these things because I'm trying to build a certain subset of my overall fighting skill. I'm not looking to win at practice. There's no such thing as winning at practice. Winning at practice is getting better. And so I go to try to build my art more. And the other people there, I like to help them build their art. Both because I like those people at practice and because the better they are, the more they can push my art as well. So it's kind of it's feedback loop, a positive one. Tournament, I'm just going to get the job done. I don't really feel much in tournament. I want to solve the puzzle that's in front of me and then forget about it and go on to the next one until the day is over. So they're incredibly different mindsets, and that's, I don't care about winning at practice. In fact, I think that tends to make for bad practice. So I try to avoid that mindset completely.
Practice is the time to try something different, to try something new, to try an angle or a line you haven't practiced before. I use my practice as basically when I'm learning to fight, what I want to do is I'm not fighting the whole fight. I'm fighting very small pieces. I want to, the better the more perfect my exchange, they make an offer, I receive that offer, and the more perfect my exchange is from each moment, their strike, my defense, my return, the more perfect that exchange is, the byproduct is you win more fights. And that's what I want to practice. I'm going to give them something to work with. I'm going to respond more perfectly if I can. Byproduct is I'll win the fights. That's what practice for me about is I'm trying to break down the fight into very small fundamentals, very small bite-sized pieces. In the tournament, practice is also for myself. It is for myself to better my art. And as Mark was describing, if we can teach other fighters what's the best thing they can do against myself, then I have to get better about my weaknesses. I don't want to hide my weaknesses. I need you to exploit them so I can get better at them. In tournament, that's the time to express love of kingdom, love of consort, dedication to the art. It's not time to practice or play. We're getting the business done. It is about putting the pieces together, making those perfect moments happen at your command. And that's what practice is about. Learning to make those perfect moments happen when you want them to.
Yeah, I'm really, really lucky to have, the two of you giving me pointers and stuff like that. We've talked on this subject before, but I thought it was really important, especially for the unbelt community, to hear your views on practices and everything, because I know there's a lot of times where an unbelt gets to a certain level where they're doing pretty good, and then they start to turn practices into what I think of like what pickups should be. Like pickups should be, it's not a practice. It's two folks fight each other. They're going at it really, really well. They do 3 passes and then they talk about like what happened, what they learned, and hopefully they had a good time. And I don't think practice should be that. Practice isn't about, like Duke Mark said, it's not about winning. It's more about learning. And I imagine for the two of you that it's hard to concentrate on your learning when people are always trying to, come up and knock the hat off your head. You know what I mean?
Something we discussed a little bit earlier is that we're going to practice. We're trying to practice new things or maybe reinforce good basics. We're not out there to win practice. We're not out there to count coup, but people come at us with the intent of putting that feather in their cap, which means that that's not fun for us. If it's finals tournament every single time we fight, we don't get to practice. We just get to do our best to smash you, keep you down. We don't want to get hurt. First off, I don't wear any armor, right? I can't afford you to let you hit me if you're going to go at me as hard as you can. And it's not fun for me. I'm not learning anything. I'm just trying to keep you from besting me. How can I practice on getting myself in awkward positions so I can get out of an awkward position? How can I practice a new move or a new line when you're busy just trying to count coup? I can't practice like that. That's not fun. If you want to come at me and say, hey, I would like crown finals, that's fine. I can give you that. But that shouldn't be every fight of practice. That's not what practice is about. I'm also trying to practice new things. So give me a chance to practice also.
So I find at practice when that happens, it's stifling to both fighters. If you're trying to win, you're not going to try new stuff or work on things you know are not as developed yet because you're trying to win. You're also not going to take risks if you know that the penalty for getting it wrong is losing if you really invested in that, or injury, right? If I know if I try this shot, this new thing I'm working on, and it goes badly and I'm going to get really hurt for it, why would I try that thing? You know, so both fighters end up stifled if they're just trying to smash each other all the time in practice. That doesn't mean you don't have good hard fights at practice. That's not what I'm trying to say. But there's a very different mentality. And, you know, nobody's immune to feeling bad about how things are going in practice. If I know that somebody is just trying to smash me, I could button down and just pop them over and over and over again. I didn't learn very much. They probably didn't learn very much. There's a good chance there might be some hurt feelings at the end of that set. There's nothing positive coming out of that. And I like the freedom, not only to try new things for me at practice, but I like the freedom to feel generous at practice. I can try this thing, and that other person, maybe they get to try their new thing. They get to land a shot maybe they wouldn't have before. We get to both walk away from that set feeling good about ourselves and each other, and we've grown, or we can feel stifled and maybe there's some bad feelings because somebody got smashed over and over again. So, you know, that mentality is really important. And it happens at a lot of levels. So my former squire, Eva, when she was kind of the female, the most prominent female fighter in her kingdom, she would go to practices or pickup fields and really kind of struggle with that. And I said to her, you know, when you go out to fight somebody, just try this. When you go out there, friendly, what are you working on today? And that reminds people that we're there to grow. And that also reminds you, because nobody's immune to the little stings of ego, right? If the other person's coming after you, that resets your internal conversation. Well, and I'll tell you, I've gone places and asked people, hey, what you working on today? Nothing. Okay, well, I'm going to work on these things, but I know that I got to, and frankly, I've had some really negative sets when that person's answer's been nothing. All right, but at least I knew, right? So at the very least, you can ask those questions and try to reframe the conversation for both of you, or at least yourself, or at least you know what you're getting into. So
I find if you're willing to lose, especially at practice, is when you're going to learn more. Put yourself in bad places, try things you haven't tried before. Maybe your timing's going to be off, maybe the position's going to be wrong, but you'll have a chance to play with it if you're willing to lose. And losing's okay. You're not losing, it's data points. You're gaining more knowledge. By that negative is still you've gained more information. If you're willing to lose, you're willing to move forward. You try and teach people how to change something about what they've already done, and they're unwilling to stop what they're doing. If what you're doing only gets you to 20%, maybe it gets you to 50%, and you're not willing to stop what you're doing to make the next step forward, then you're going to stay there. How about you're willing to change what you do? If what you do isn't giving you everything you want, stop what you're doing and do something different. That's where practice comes in.
And that's hard all the time. It's easier if you trust your opponents, you know, your partners to practice. I've gone to practice where Havek is at, and I've been trying some new stuff, and I got striped up and down, you know, the side. But he knew I was working on something, and he wasn't like, I knew I had the freedom that nobody was going to judge me because I got hit a little bit more than I might have, or that I didn't look as graceful as I might have. I'm trying this new thing. I trusted the people I was at practice with, and it gave me the freedom to do those things. And if you don't have that trust because the other person's just trying to cave your head in all the time, it makes it much harder to take those risks and try new things. And then you get stifled. You don't grow.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's really, really important. Is sometimes you just have to check ego, especially at practice, because that's not why you're there. You're there to learn, and it doesn't matter if you win or lose as long as you're learning, in my opinion. But once again, if anybody cared about my opinion, they would have told me about it already. So let's pick up the conversation with something a little bit lighter. So we got this question in, and I think you guys will like this one. And it's about your chains, or basically, or more specifically, your favorite chain, and where that came from. and if it has a story that goes along with it.
So I can start that one. So I've got a few chains. I've had one chain most of my career. And that chain came from a gentleman. His name is Steen Halverson. Most of you have probably never heard of Steen. He was an amazing man. Could have won many tournaments, but was so humble and so polite. He was unwilling to basically let his opponent die. But he really embodied what I believed, a knightly perspective. He had a good, solid understanding of what he believed in. And when I was knighted with his chain. I kept that chain for years and years. I had one squire at the time. And that chain then went to my former squire, Mari. I've gotten a couple of chains over the years since then, but that chain, because of where it came from, I never had a knight to work with, but I asked Steen for something of him because he meant so much to me, even though we weren't close, but at a distance, he made an impact.
That's a tough one. I've been given a few chains in my time, and they've all meant a lot for various reasons. For me, I think the chain is probably the most powerful symbol of knighthood. The fealty bonds between the knight and the crown, and between the crown and the populace and the knights, and it's incredibly important. The chain I was knighted with came from Duke Jade, and he gave it to me because he had a pair made for him and a former squire of his who was a martial artist, and he had said that my approach to the art made him think of his former squire who now lives in Drakenwald. So that was very meaningful. The chain I wear most of the time when I fight is actually a wrought steel chain that Sir Zaid made for me in his forge, and he made it he gave it to me during my vigil, and he was kind of my foster knight because my knight lived in the mist and Zaid took care of me quite a bit in Sinagua. And then I think the chain that surprised me the most and made me cry, I was Queen's Champion, and I was fighting matched weapons fights, and I was fighting sword and buckler and spear and mace and just whatever people wanted to fight with. And Duke Connor, who had not seen me in a long time, but had saw me when I just started in the SEA and was not impressed because I was a 19-year-old with a big mouth. Hadn't seen me in a long time, and he was watching me fight. And he was watching me fight sword and buckler, and he walked out and he said, "I've never seen you fight with anything but your longsword, and I had no idea that you had turned into somebody that could pick up anything and fight with it." And I'm so impressed. And he pulled the chain that Fabian had made for him off his neck and put it on me on the field. And it blew my mind. And that chain has gone on to my former squire, Eva. She wears that chain. And the chain I was knighted with actually went to Fergus because I was so impressed with him. So the only chain I have left from that bunch is the wrought steel chain. And I'll hold on to that one for a little while longer.
That's very, very cool. I love hearing the stories of people's chains and their collection. I mean, most of the knights that I know have more than one, and it's just kind of cool the way that they get around and everything. So thank you for sharing that with us, guys. That was awesome. So I have a question now that comes from an unbelt who you guys both know because it's me.
Okay.
So, oh shoot, where did it go? So I know that during this whole pandemic and basically all the craziness that's been keeping us at home. And I know that you guys both have been fighting quite a bit. I've been trying to get out on the Pell as much as I possibly can. But what part of your entire fighting persona are you working on right now? Is it fighting techniques? Is it armor? Is it movement? You know, what are you guys working on to improve yourself right now?
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. Well, so I had my day-to-day self-training routine has not changed much. I'm still working on my fitness, so I do resistance training 3 times a week, and I do cardio 3 times a week, and I do Pel work every day. The last few years, I've been really focused on researching period fighting techniques and using them in SEA heavy combat. So I'm continuing to write about those things and put out videos. I would say the part of my fighting that I've been working on the most has been the teaching piece, because I've been trying to support the community in this weird, awful time. So I'm putting out a lot more teaching content, which is forcing me to analyze what I do, how I do it, why I do it, and the way I present it. So I think the way I explain certain things has changed even over the course of these 2-3 months, because I'm trying to express it to an audience that I don't have right there. I can't check and see if it makes sense to them. They can't give me that funny look that says I phrased something very silly and I should try again. So that I think that teaching piece and that analysis piece is probably what I've been focused on the most outside of my normal stuff.
So I have started over from scratch again. I'm trying to fight left-handed, and I am not left-handed. So that's where I'm at currently. It's awful and it's terrible, and I get hit a lot, and my technique is in the toilet. But that's how it goes when you start over, especially if you start something so dramatically different to try again to carve it out of stone. It is fun, though. I wish I had a chance to fight with more people. Luckily, I live in a house with 2 other fighters. We get to fight some. I need a lot more slow work than I get. But starting over from scratch is something that I tend to do on a fairly regular basis to kind of remind myself of the struggle, because the struggle is part of the fun, actually. Getting better. You get to take those giant strides because you get better every time you pick a weapon up. You get to a certain point in your fighting, you've refined it down to a smooth set of skills. It's hard to then take those steps forward. When you start over, you're terrible, and you can start over taking those big steps, making good strides, making corrections every time you fight. And that's fun. It is hard to watch yourself when you're starting over, like, oh, that's awful fighting. But you know, it's part of the getting better process, I suppose.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's one of the things that I really like about both of you guys is I've seen you both. You know, you've gotten really, really good at your main or your preferred weapons forms, and then you go and you pick up something else, and you learn it to the point where you are mastering that, and then you can also teach that, because you know, maybe you've got somebody who wants to learn from you, but they don't fight longsword like Duke Mark does, or they don't fight tiny heater like Duke Effect does. That thing's ridiculous. That thing, it's that big. I swear to you, it's like
It's 12 inches by 14 inches.
right. It's like an iron, but it's impressive, and but I really appreciate the fact that as knights, you guys make sure that you are proficient in multiple weapons forms, not just for yourself, but so that you can teach, which I think that, like, that's the biggest deal. Like, you guys, you've attained the pinnacle, and now your job is to, you know, of course, win tournaments and lead wars and lead men, but teaching, in my opinion, is the biggest thing, the most important thing that you do. Because if we don't have anybody teaching these new fighters coming out, then we got no new fighters.
Yeah, there won't be any more SCA. If we can't replace ourselves, it will all go away.
Yeah.
And we have already lost some great heroes that had such great skill. They're no longer reachable. That it's sad to watch some of those great fighters go away because they don't feel they're relevant. your experience is still relevant. We wish they would come back, but some of them just can't. And I'd hate to leave the society less because I couldn't give as much as I could.
Well, I know that both of you, and if you guys haven't been taking a peek, Duke Mark has done a series of videos that I will be posting all of the backlogged videos that he's been doing onto the Ask a Knights Live page, as well as any new videos he does. And then Duke Avec just earlier today, actually right before this this show started, he was teaching on another show. Duke Avec, do you want to talk to about that? Because I didn't get a chance to get all the names and everything down.
So they're doing a series of nightly training classes, and mine is basically a different approach to the Pell. A lot of people are standing at the Pell, throwing a lot of shots without really considering what their fighting is about. So it's a different way to look at your Pell. So it's maybe not quite so boring. You're not just doing a repetitive motion. I'm not exactly sure how it's being broadcast or what the format is, but I can make sure that I can get that information to you so you can post it if you wish to, because there's a lot of information she's posting.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll put that up. I know that Duke Mark also did a video with the same young lady earlier in last month. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so I mean there are some really, really good resources out there, and we'll try and make them as available as possible. Duke Mark, do you want to talk about your videos real quick?
Sure. So it started out as just a way to try to keep my students engaged, and then I shared it and it got a positive response. So every Tuesday I'm putting out some short videos. They're focused on certain techniques or certain types of Pell work, or some footwork classes, and they're designed to be short and digestible. They're usually 3 to 10 minutes, nothing huge. So they're going up weekly, and I'll just keep doing that until we actually get to go back to practice and hit each other for real. So it's a little bit of keeping myself sane and a little bit of trying to keep the community engaged in some way.
No, and they're absolutely wonderful. I was actually watching Havek's training video right before we started this, which is maybe why I started a little bit late and it wasn't completely prepared. But, you know, I'm trying to learn this stuff just like everybody else. Excuse me. So, real quick. So in Havek, in your last video, or that one that was just on, we got to see your Pell. And I've never seen a Pell quite like that. Do you think you could describe it real quick? I know like you can't show it, but maybe we can get a picture of it later and I'll put it up on the page.
Sure. So it's 3 posts that are in concrete, and their posts are actually steel, and they have unions at particular heights. And the way it works is where the union comes across between 2 uprights, that's a landing post. So that's like there's a union that becomes between 2, basically the mid chest. There's a union that basically is like just above the hips. There's a bridge across the front that has the post in the back so that you can practice to beat that front plane and hit the plane behind. And as you rotate yourself around this 3-dimensional Pell, there's different angles you can use to learn how to beat the lead edge to hit the edge behind. Because that's really what we're doing. We're beating either a shield edge or a sword edge. We're trying to beat one plane to reach the plane behind. If you're just hitting a straight pole, no fighter is shaped like that.
Yeah, I was really impressed by your Pell, and it got me thinking of ways that I can modify mine to be a little bit more like that. And I think I have some ideas. So if I come up with some things that I think are interesting, after I get the modifications done, I will post some pictures. And if I can get some pictures of yours, I'd love to post some pictures. And I'd love to see later on down the road just a whole video from you, just going over the Pell. Like, don't even hit it, just like showing us everything.
It is interesting. a lot of my PEL work, the actual strike is not terribly relevant. It is the position and the moment to strike is important. How do I get from where I want to make the strike at, my good firing platforms, moving from outside of range through mid-range, moving through the defense into the offense. The actual strike is not terribly important. I mean, you should throw it, but that's not really the point of the drill. The drill is getting from one place to where you want to fire from, in balance and in good rhythm.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so I'm going to throw another question at you, gentlemen. And while you guys are answering that, I'm going to invite anyone in the chat, if you have a good question that you would like to throw at these two good Dukes, throw it up in the chat. Hopefully I'll see it, and I'll get it out to you. We've got about 15 minutes left or so. So give me a good question, not a lame question. So
No pressure, though.
no pressure. Okay, so this one I think is really important. So how do you like to be approached? If someone is interested in either just learning from you or talking to you about anything, or if it's a little bit more serious and they want to approach you about maybe a deeper relationship, man at arms or squire or something like that. How do you like to be approached, or what do you think is appropriate?
Can I start this one, Mark?
Definitely.
He and I have a very similar outward expression. And I find that those people that cannot bridge that barrier of the persona that they have made for us, then they're not worth a conversation yet anyway. When they're willing to talk to us and bridge that gap, what they perceive as this gap, because we're not super jolly guys, right? We're here doing our job. This is what we like to do. This is how we like to be. We're not putting on a persona. This is how I am. But if that scares you, you're not ready for the conversation. Yes?
If I could interrupt you just one moment. I believe that is called resting night face.
But if
I understand what you're saying.
If you're bold enough to step right through that and say, Havek, I have some questions, or I would like to talk this subject, that'd be great. If that black void is too hard for you to walk through, you're not ready for the conversation anyway. Just talk to us like people.
So, yeah, so what I would say is that if I'm at an event, particularly if I'm watching fighting, I know I have resting bitch face. I'm focused on what is going on, and I love fighting so much that when I'm watching it, I am very intense. And when I can see pictures of myself and know that I'm watching fighting because I have that expression on my face. That doesn't mean I'm angry. That doesn't mean that I'm feeling antisocial. That just means I really love fighting and I'm watching it really intensely. I am not super likely to seek people out just because I'm shy. I'm not a big, outgoing kind of a person. I think I'm fairly friendly, and I am absolutely happy to talk fighting and other things at any point. So please, if you see me and I look pissed off, I'm probably just thinking really hard about fighting or watching fighting. And I'm not particularly worried about rank. I don't need a lot of your graces and bowing. I don't. That stuff actually makes me uncomfortable.
Yep.
My name is Mark. I'm very happy to just, frankly, I'm much more proud of the knighthood anyway. So if you need a title, Sir Mark, is much preferable anyway. But I'm happy with Mark. I'm just a guy that really, really likes fighting.
Yep.
So, I will, please come talk to me about fighting. And if I look intense, it's just because I love fighting so much.
As a side note, I will also I rarely approach someone to give them advice unless I just see something horrible. But for the most part, you haven't asked my opinion. It's not my job to give it unless you've asked for it. I find it rude when people bust in thinking, hey, I know all the things you need to know, and I'm going to tell you what I think you need to have happen here. You didn't ask my opinion. But if you ask my opinion, prepare to drink from a fire hose, because I will give you my opinion. but I'm not going to give it unless you've asked me permission to say, hey, I've got a question here, or I want your input.
It's very, very funny. I, I've known Mark a little bit longer than I've known Dukovec, and you're absolutely right. You seem unapproachable, but you are a font of knowledge, and if you just talk, if you just break that barrier respectfully, politely, um, yeah, you will. I won't say that you will talk all day, but because you
Maybe talking about fighting, it's very likely, actually.
Yeah,
yes, okay,
for talking about fighting, sure.
about fighting. And believe it or not, you guys can call me a liar if you want. I've even heard Havex tell a joke before.
It happens. It does.
It does.
But I tend to speak very quietly because I'm only talking to the people in front of me. So I'm not going to say things really loud. So if you want to hear, especially about fighting, some funny comments, if you stand really close, sometimes you'll hear them. But be prepared. Sometimes they're funny and sometimes they're mean. Right? That's why they're quiet. It's like, that was awful what I just saw.
Okay, so Dukovec, Mari is watching.
Oh, yay.
And she would very much like you to talk a little bit about your targeting computer. And let me get this exactly right. It says, boss, talk about your targeting computer and your initial fight assessment tools.
Oh, yeah. So before you've even engaged, I think it's important to assess your opponent, look at what they're carrying, what kind of shield is it, how long is the sword, what's their armor look like, where's the damage. If they got their helmet caved in one particular spot, they don't block that real well. The leg armor caved in, where's the damage on the shield? I know where their head's going to poke out based on where the damage is on the shield, because you can see the strikes where people are striking at their head. Is it a really small shield? Tells me a lot about how they're going to move. So those are data points. We haven't even started fighting yet, but I have an idea of where you're going to go, where your head's going to poke out, and what you block and what you don't block well. Once we get closer, I'm going to move, and I know Mark does this in a very different way because of the style he fights with the longsword, but it's similar in its application. We're going to move around this outside bubble around you and see where you trigger, what you perceive, what you don't perceive. You let me move through a set threat zone and you never saw that threat zone, that's going to bring up a data point like, I see that you didn't respond to this, you didn't respond to that, or you respond to this incorrectly. And then you become a collection of targets. And my job is to put sword A onto target B. And that's really the generation of the fight is, it's not about you anymore. It's not really about me anymore. We are now doing our puzzle game. Sword A goes on to location B, and you're going to let me move through this thing. Or I'm going to invite you to throw what you think is your very best shot, and I'm going to try and punish you for that choice.
That's very cool.
But you can learn a lot from a distance.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because you guys know, in my old job, that was what it was all about. It was about long range recon before you ever did anything. So, so Duke Mark, do you do any kind of assessment, kind of like that?
I do. It's very different. The way our articulated is very different. So when I come out against an opponent, I'm very kind of energy and movement based. That's how I articulate it to myself. So when I and especially that bubble, that kind of threat bubble, you can tell what kind of a fight that person wants to bring you based on how they react to you coming by their threat bubble. So do they lean back a little bit? Do they lean forward a little bit? Do they hunker? You can feel a lot of, do they have anxious energy about them? So for me, I really don't worry too much about what my opponent is showing me. I worry about what they're going to show me, where that person will be. And you can gain a lot of that information based on very, very, very tiny, if you're a chi person, you can talk about their energy flow. If you're more mechanically minded, you can talk about like micro cues, right? But however you read that person, you go out there and you can learn a lot based on very little adjustments or reactions they make to your kind of presented threats. And then you can do that bigger if you're learning how to do that. You know, with the longsword, the safest thing that I can throw that is very non-committed and doesn't put me too much risk is a thrust, right? I can throw a thrust at their face. How does their body react to that motion tells me a lot about the kind of fight that they want to bring to me. And once I know that, I can either encourage that in a way that hurts them, or I can take that away from them. So I think that I do a lot of what Havek does, but I don't do it as much on the conscious level. It's a very feel-based thing for me. And it also, I think, we get to a lot of the same places in fighting, but we do it in almost opposite ways. I very much like to direct a fight with my offense. I will present you a threat, you will make a choice, and then I will punish you for that choice. And I like to be in charge of that. So I want to be engaging those things. Havek pretty much forces people to choose an offense, and then he punishes them for that.
I will actually move through their offense. I will move through it, getting them to fire the shot I want them to fire. So I control with defense, Mark controls with offense.
So this is like, I love this, and this is one of the reasons why I have just loved doing this show. We've only done, was it 5 now, and this being 6, but it's a redo. The amount of information that you all are putting out there is, because like we said before, everybody is different. Everybody learns a little differently. Everybody is more or less comfortable doing different things. Hearing about all of the ways that you approach things, you know, from this side or that side, from this angle or that angle, it's just giving so many more tools to all these unbelts. And I say this with just a little bit of levity. Man, you guys better look out. If these guys are listening to you and listening to all of your brothers and sisters out there who have been on this show, and they start applying that to their practice, man, there's going to be a whole wave of new challenges, I should say, for you.
I hope so.
Nothing would make us happier than to see the level of fighting rise. That nothing would make me happier.
I knew you guys were going to say that. All right, so Evil would like to know, what are your greatest challenges as a knight now that you've achieved the accolade? What is your greatest challenge now?
For me, it's you never get to stop being a knight. Is that you have to maintain being knightly even after your accolade. So you don't get to attain the title. You have to then continue to earn it every single day. I could make a mistake today. I could make a mistake tomorrow. I could step on myself in a horrendous fashion. I probably won't, because I've trained not to, but doesn't mean it won't happen. I could miss a shot. I could be incredibly rude to somebody. All kinds of unknightly things could happen to me right now. Likely not going to happen, but that it could happen. And I think a lot of people forget the fact that achieving the accolade doesn't make you immune to then becoming rude or boorish or a bully. We have a lot of knights that are bullies. That's unknightly behavior. And it can happen to me too. I have to always be aware of what I believe in and how I'm going to move forward and try and be true to my current self as well as my past self.
So one of the things that I say a lot is that knighthood is willingly taking on the burden that you will fail every day in service to the kingdom, because none of us can possibly live up to the knight we have in our head. We all have an idea of what a knight is, and we're all mortal, and so we all are going to fall short in some way. And so the knowledge that I have willingly taken on the burden of failing every day in my quest to be a perfect knight for the kingdom, that can weigh really heavily sometimes. And we talked about this in fighting last time, that my biggest worry in fighting is not losing or getting hurt, but letting other people down. But that's also something as well. You know, the knighthood's a very visible order, and because everybody has a slightly different idea of what a knight is, in a certain way, I will always fail someone because they will have an idea of what a knight is that I'm not exactly that person. Maybe my idea of knighthood is different, or so it's really hard to know that you have kind of willingly taken on the burden of failing every day and trying to do it anyway, and trying to keep the faith that the journey is worth it. That's tough, and that's what makes the people around you so important, because I don't think anybody is able to do it by themselves.
Thank you guys so much. It sucks because I have so many more like questions that I want to ask you, but unfortunately, it looks like we are at our time limit. I just want to thank you again for coming out a second time, and lending your wisdom to the unbelts. And you got a few belts out there who are watching, but you know, this isn't for them. They can watch, but I actually I think they should watch, and I'm happy that they are watching, because you know it's going to be their turn to be on this show soon, and I would encourage all of you to give your favorite brothers and sisters a little goose, have them send a message to the page, tell them that they want to come on this and give their opinions so they can be as cool as you two. Well, closer to being as cool as you two. But seriously, thank you again for being on the show a second time.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Well, I couldn't do this without people volunteering like you guys. So hopefully we'll see you guys again at a later date. Maybe when we have some more interesting questions for you, or if we get some specific questions for you, I might hit you up and bug you individually.
Sure.
But that's about it. Would you guys like to talk about anything real quick? Plug some of the projects that you're doing, or tell people to come see you wherever you are posting things?
Most of my social media comes through my former squire Helga. She is much more social than I am, and she and I will hammer through ideas, and she will go out there and put it out in the world. I don't necessarily need the recognition for the ideas. She can put them out just fine. Mara used to do the same thing.
Yeah. I'm a school teacher, so I got drug into the 21st century because I have to teach distance right now. So I'm pretty responsive, I think, on social media. And if you just search for my mundane name on YouTube, the videos will pop up. And I link them to my Facebook page every week as well. So it should be pretty easy to find.
And of course, I will be sharing them to the Ask a Nice Live page. So all you guys out there who have come back for another chance to see one of these episodes, I really, really do appreciate it. Thanks for coming back. For all you new folks, welcome. If it's your first time, please come back and see us. We have another episode coming up on Thursday of this week. We normally don't do 2 episodes a week, but we're trying to get the ones that we missed. Next week, we will also have 2 episodes. We'll have Sir Fergus and Earl Giles from their previous episode. That'll be another redo. But we have, I can't remember who's coming up. We have so many good shows coming up. But if you want to know who's coming up and you want to see what's going on, go to the page, like it, share it with anybody who you think needs to see it. And each one of these videos will be up there as they get finished. So thanks everybody for watching. Thank you, my gracious guests, for coming on again, and we'll see you guys next time. Good night.
Thanks a lot.